Part 1 is session 51. Let's get into harvest and interdimensional and interstellar travel. Let's begin. This is the first session of book 3, so already we have covered 2 books in its entirety for those who followed the original editions, where there was 4 books with the raw material, and then the 5th book, which was personal material that was excluded from the original books, and then Carla and Jim decided to publish it in the 90s, and that contained commentary that you find all together in the lawofone.info, which is really where I get the material from, because it has the re-listened version, has the raw contact, it has everything in it. So it's a really good resource. I always have it in my description here in every video, so you can go check it out if you're interested, and if you haven't, because I think for anybody who is a student of the Law of One, this website is by far the best, even beyond, I mean, I've gotten used to it. LL Research recently, as I record this video, they overhauled their website, so you find a similar type of, I would say, format for reading the raw contact, but nothing that like lawofone.info, seriously. However, you can go check it out there too. I think this is just much more organized, the lawofone.info, and we're actually doing the efforts right now to do the Spanish version, to post it soon. So, you know, there's it's a really good website. So, in any case, I'm already going off track here. But the point is that we are in book 3 so far. We have covered these 2 books, and that's not really that important for the raw contact, because the raw contact is just all the... Actually, I'm not sure if, and I even have the books here, I always say it, I'm not sure if the raw contact finishes at session 50 and then picks up the second book. This is 2 books. The raw contact is 2 books as opposed to 4. But yeah. So that's the first note, and the second note is that we can start with the session right away. There's not much to talk about. There's not even a check, is there, on Carla? The first question is not even checking on Carla, so we can go into the first question right away. For some reason, Don, I guess, stopped asking that, but he does ask it in the previous, in the next session. So I'm not sure why he didn't ask it here, but you know, this session starts with Ra starting their usual communication, saying, "I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now." And then this goes into Don asking right away, "As we begin this session, book 3 of the Law of One, there are a couple of questions. One of fairly non-transient importance, and one which I consider to be a bit transient, that I feel obligated to ask because of communication with others. The first is just clearing up final points about harvest for our friend Leo Sprinkle, and I was wondering if there is a supervision over the harvest, and if so, why this supervision is necessary, and how it works, since an entity's harvestability is the violet ray. Is it necessary for entities to supervise the harvest, or is it automatic? Could you answer this, please?" It's a really good question. Why is there supervision during the harvest if harvest is supposed to be automatic? So Ra says, "In time of harvest, there are always harvesters. The fruit is formed as it will be, but there is some supervision necessary to ensure that this bounty is placed as it should be, without the bruise or the blemish. There are those of 3 levels watching over harvest. The first level is planetary, and that which may be called angelic. This type of guardian includes the mind-body-spirit complex totality or higher self of an entity, and those inner plane entities which have been attracted to this entity through its inner seeking." So again, just to recap, Don is asking why there is supervision. if, and it's a really insightful question. I really like it. I think it was actually Leo Sprinkle. I'm not sure who that is, but he was a friend, and that guy asked that question. So thank you, Leo. So yeah, why is there supposed to be a process of gardening, if you will, for the harvest, if it's automatic? And so Ra is going to explain. In essence, it gives us like windows in which we can see the process of harvest, what it means, what happens, and what's the ideal environment for the harvest to occur. And the ideal environment meaning, all things considered, what's the process for the entity to go through so they can be harvested, or even harvest would be repeaters. They are harvested for their next incarnation. So Ra says that they go with the metaphor, of the harvesting. And again, harvest is the word that, for, I would say, a small percentage of people instills some fear, because they're still in the human mentality that we are separate from the Creator. And this is one of the first teachings that really needs to be settled down in people who are studying the Law of One. It's usually people who are getting into the material, and then they are almost reading to find something that just say, oh, no, that's saying harvest. I'm just gonna get, these people are making me fear, and this is, I say so much, and I'm sorry that I have to go on a tangent here, but it's really important to establish first who you are. This is why the key lesson, I say it's first grade or even kindergarten, to learn who you are, what you are, because in that place you will never be afraid of anything, and all you will see is what is skillful and what is not, what is wise and what is not, and that's it. And if in your wisdom of knowing who you are, and that of course is not the ego, you gotta find beyond the ego, who are you? That's another topic. It's a very simple one, but it makes it very complex with our Western mentality. But the point is that if we are sure of what we are, then none of these words can make us feel human. It makes us understand the creation in the grand scheme, in the great view of the universe. So again, I don't think this is you, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this, but it's something to keep in mind whenever we talk about this stuff. And harvest is just synonym for graduation. It was taken out of the Bible because, remember, there's a lot of, even the word angelic, which we have in this paragraph, it's taken from the Bible. I mean, there are no angels per se as we know them. There are no gardeners or guardians or even Ra as we picture it. There is no such thing. There is just one energy taking different forms, and that's all our minds. So this is a little abstract, but it's the truth. However, we need words for reference. That's what words are. Language is a way to convey ideas, and ideas are made out of abstract thoughts that is has its base on reality, and reality is neutral. So you get my idea here. So again, this is all to bring it to the point of, say, harvest and angels are taken out from the Bible. Why were they taken out of the Bible? Because Carla's mind was Christian. She was Christian, so a lot of these things for them to understand. Now remember, Ra didn't intend for these to be books. They didn't care. All they care was, how do I make you three guys understand the Law of One? That's all we care. If you want to make a book, they told Don, that's up to you, that's your service, but we don't care, as long as one person is illuminated. So a lot of this content, and a lot of people don't know this, they think that this was meant to be a book. It was not meant to be a book. It was meant to be a channeling for 3 people, period. They decided to publish it, and that's their service to us. Thank you, guys. So again, this is why the material is taken out for people who were brought up in the West. I mean, if this was, a Hindu channeler I guarantee you there would be a lot of Hindu mythology here. This was, in one of our tribes in the forest, not the forest, the jungles, in the Amazons. I guarantee there would be a lot of ritualistic and shamanistic language involved. It's an adaptation to it. So in any case, this is probably a longer introduction to the question that it deserves, but I went on a tangent as usual. I think it's important though. It's really important to keep this in mind. So, time of harvest are always harvesters because the process, and we'll see why there needs to be harvest. And I'll put my own analogy here too at the end. And why is automatic, but at the same time it needs caretakers. Just put it that way, caretakers of the process. So they start describing who are these guardians. They say that there are those of 3 levels watching over harvest. The first one is planetary and that which may be called angelic. So let's demystify angelic. Angelic only means those beings that are part of, I would call it sometimes, and please don't take this dimensionally in your mind, but only as an analogy. I say there are horizontal entities and there are vertical entities. We are vertical entities who are ascending through the densities of consciousness. The horizontal ones are the angelic ones or the demonic ones. Doesn't matter. It's just the vibration that exists for the layers, the infinite layers that exist between densities and chakras and subchakras and so on. So these entities are simply existing there. They're not, in prison. They are an expression of the logos. They are a manifestation of the logos in those aspects of itself. So that's why I call them horizontal beings. These are the angels. So of course they exist here on the planet and they're called angelic. Those are the ones they're referring here. But now you see, these are guardians. These are the first level guardians. Then within this, there are guardians that includes the mind, body, spirit, complex totality or higher self, which are basically the same thing but in different views. One is looking, in essence, towards infinity, and the other one is going towards finity. That's the higher self, and the complex totality is going to the other, but it's the same thing. One informs the other. So this is another one that is present, of course, because that's part of the vertical self that is one being altogether with the creator. So that's part of the mix there. Then there is, they say, of an entity and those of an inner plane entities which have been attracted to this entity through its inner seeking. So the inner plane entities are those entities who reside also in our inner planes, say within third density time-space. They exist and they are attracted to us. These are different from the angelic beings, meaning that they simply reside there, and they are in the process also of, they may be residing there in time-space. They haven't achieved fourth density, but they are in the process. So disincarnated beings that exist in time-space. Of course, that depends on the individual and the entities that have attracted to itself. That, I think that's a really good phrase for us to ponder a little bit into the nature of spiritual practices, because yes, we do say that they're, and we're gonna get into this too in this we should get to that question before it gets too long of a video. But I guess what I want to say here before we get into that is that discipline, spiritual disciplines, attract this. And you see, what I'm trying to be careful here is not to say that, or to infer that we should practice anything specific, rituals, certain exercises, and so on. There is no need for that. This comes naturally as we are involved in a view of the world and the universe in general. And we see it differently. We see it from a spiritual perspective. These practices arise in us, so they're not imposed on us. Now, because we see them in others, we see them in so-called spiritual people, we say, oh, I need to do that. Oh, I need to do kriyas. Oh, I need to do yoga. I need to do, meditation. I need to pray. I need to go to church. I need to get communion and so on. All of that is nonsense, in the sense that you don't have to do it to achieve something. Is that you become something, and then all of a sudden you manifest these things and you create them as you will. So in any case, we'll get to that. Hopefully, I think it's question 6, if I did my homework correctly. But these are the first level, or the first class, as Ra calls them. Yes, level, class, so on. We're gonna get to the second one here when Ra says, the second class of those who ward this process are those of the Confederation who have the honor duty of standing in the small places at the edge of the steps of light love, so that those entities being harvested will not, no matter how confused or unable to make contact with their higher self, stumble and fall away for any reason other than the strength of the light. These Confederation entities catch those who stumble and set them aright, so that they may continue into the light. So these are the second one. Okay, how do we see this? There is a process in which the newly dead entity will go through the process of measuring the light that they can absorb, that they can withstand. And in this measuring, in this resistance or tolerance of the light, something happens that I'm not sure what it is, but they say those who stumble, it's almost like they are wont on saying that this is like a ladder, that this is like rungs on a ladder, that you go and then you feel like, okay, this is my tolerance of light, I'll stay here. And that depends on where you are, either 3rd density time space, 4th density time space. So you will be judged. This is why the word judge, like God will judge you when you die. This is the judgment. It's an inner judgment, and it's almost like the sun is judging you by how much you have been in the dark. It's not the sun, it's yourself. You are regulating the amount of light that you can get from the sun by squinting, depending on how long you have been in the darkness. And if you have accustomed yourself to the sun, well, guess what? You won't be squinting, you'll be absorbing a lot of light. So this is the type of biblical judgment that they used to say. It's funny how things got distorted, and it's really funny. I find it just hilarious when you read these things and you're like, oh, finally I get it, this is what they meant. And now you see how childish it looks. So okay, I get a kick out of that. So okay, these are Confederation entities, they say. Those of the Confederation who have the honor duty of standing in the small places at the edge of the steps, see, the rungs of the ladder, of light love, so that those entities go in. I mean, you can picture this in your imagination. Being harvested will not, however, confused or unable to make contact with the higher self. I guess it depends on the being and what, their life. Because we do bring, at the moment of death, it's almost like a transition of perception. I'm saying this as if I have died in the past. Well, I have died, I just don't remember. But I'm saying it like if I remember. But the way I picture it, actually 333, it's a good confirmation. And it's about to be 222 again. It's awesome. So, alright. The point is, it's funny how the universe talks to you. And yeah, synchronicities are fun when they happen like this. So I would say, yeah, you die, and there is a transition period. This is common sense to me. Your perception is so focused on space-time, on physicality, on separation, and so on. And now you have to transition into time-space, which is eternity, which is perception of all your lives, previous lives, experiences, and so on. Like, that's a kind of rough transition, and some people may not be prepared. Let's say consciously prepare. I don't like that word. Let me find another one. Perceptually prepare for the transition. See, and we'll take two examples. A 4-density loving entity who is so invested in this reality will take longer and will be more confused than another one, equally harvestable 4-density loving entity who has dedicated its life to, you know, loving and caring and knowing about death and so on. It would be less confusing. So both are harvestable, but one will be more confused than the other. So the Confederation and these guardians are here to kind of help those who, you know, are confused, and basically tell them, look inside you, remember who you are, you know. So that's how I see it. In any case, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's how I visualize it. And in this way, because there's a part where they say, what do they say? These Confederation entities catch those who stumble and set them awry so that they may continue into the light. So that is, in essence, to me, in my visualization, to show them the light, the inner light. There is no other light but the inner light. And, you know, they can understand, you know, where they belong, where they have to go, so they can continue into their own light. This is how I would see it. So, you see, this is part of the harvesting process, which is not really what happens when you are between incarnations before the harvest. We covered that before. This is just a process of the higher self, and it can take long, however long it takes, you know, for an entity to make contact with their higher self. So there is a process, and it's different. It's what Ra calls the anomaly, that the anomaly of death when it happens in harvest. So let's get into the third one, where they say the third group watching over this process is that group you call the Guardians. This group is from the octave above our own and serves in this manner as light bringers. These Guardians provide the precise emissions of light love in exquisitely fastidious disseminations of discrimination, so that the precise light love vibration of each entity may be ascertained. That's a mouthful right there. So, these are the last ones. The third group watching over this process is that group you call the Guardians. These are the Guardians of... I'm a little... not confused, but I don't know how to put it into context. Let's reread it again. This group is from the octave above our own and serves... See, they're saying our own, not your own, which means the whole octave of the logos, and serves in this manner as light bringers. So these are entities who are above our octave, and are... It's, to me, has always been really abstract to visualize these entities who are in the octave above our own and are helping us in some way. But that's what they're doing. All they do, and the last phrase or sentence, which is a mouthful, like I said, kind of explains more what they do as opposed to what they are. And that's all that matters here. These Guardians provide the precise emissions of light love in exquisitely fastidious disseminations of discrimination, so that the precise light love vibration of each entity may be ascertained. So it's almost like they're bathing in the correct and proper attunement of light love to those entities. And that's what they do. It's almost, you know, like God, like the way we we picture God in the mythical way of God caring for their children. Like there is, you know, no judgment, nothing. It's just precise love into their children. I think that, you see, that's why it's helpful to imagine mythical things. It's helpful for humans. So when we kind of get into metaphysical stuff like this, which is really abstract, you have an idea of what's happening. It's like entities, which is, again, not to see like we're separate entities. Remember, it's your own mind doing this, but at a higher level. Okay, so yeah, it's I wish I could explain it a little bit better, but there is no separate entity. There is only one entity, and that is undeniable. So even these entities or guardians who are beyond our octave, it's still ourselves. The real self, not the ego self that we say, well, it's me. Does it have a beard? Well, God has a beard, supposedly, so I suppose yes. So these are the guardians, and you can see it just almost like a system, a system of itself, like a brain sends signals, and is the brain, the liver or are the kidneys, the lungs? No, they're one organism, but are different systems that are working together unanimously. They wouldn't work without, the other, so they all need each other, I have so many tales and metaphors here, but I'm gonna go into. So anyhow, there's one more paragraph that Ra says, thus the harvest is automatic in that those harvested will respond according to that which is unchangeable during harvest. That is the violet ray emanation. However, these helpers are around to ensure a proper harvesting so that each entity may have the fullest opportunity to express its violet ray selfhood. See, so the automatic part, which is again unchangeable, is the violet ray, because the violet ray, again, 7 chakras, 7 energy centers. We're talking about the 7th ray, crown chakra, Sahasrara. That is the violet ray, which is a sort of bubble. I like to call it a bubble that has different layers, but we don't have to get into that. Is the layer that is important for harvest, which is the measure of red and violet, which, funny enough, this morning I had a reflection on that while trying to sit in silence, but the mind is always chattering, and it's that red and violet are the same experience but seen from a different perspective, because when we say that the most sacred thing we can find out in our introspection is the meaning of life, right? That's the most sacred thing we can find, the meaning of life. And the meaning of life, when you get to it, is to be alive, to simply be alive. That is the biggest gift. So what is red ray? Red ray is survival, but it's not survival. I mean, it can be taken that way in the illusion of separateness. Survive. I need to survive. The I that is here. But in the other way, in contrast, or in the opposite way, survival is simply being alive, right? And being alive is red ray. Being alive is violet ray. So the sum of these two, and I'm just taking it out of the context here, but I don't know. I think it was synchronistic too. These two are the measure in which the entity is mature enough, is ripe for the harvest. So that is the violet ray, of course. That is unchangeable, and that is the automatic part of the process. Those bubbles will either remain in the tree for another harvest, or they will ripe and be taken out for consumption of the monster that devours all the fruits that we are in the universe, and it's the evil. I'm just kidding. Yeah, just that is the automatic part. Now, the analogy that I had for this, and you may say like, okay, but I still don't understand why do we need to have gardeners? Don't we need to be, completely, independent and automatic and so on? Well, why not? Is the first question. But I'll take you into the analogy of a baby being born. And I know this analogy can be taken to the point where you say like, well, what about this? And then you're just taking my analogy to you're taking my analogy for fun and not for reference. But a baby that is being born, right, the process of being born is automatic. you know, even if the mother dies, you know, I mean, the baby's still there. You know, the baby will either be alive or be born or die with the mother. But, you know, that process will be the process. That's just what it is. But taking it into a normal birth, the baby will be born. And it usually has aids. You know, it has the mother, obviously, pushing the baby out. That is part of the process. Then there are, if, you know, I'm not really in line with hospital birth. I think it's, let me not talk about hospital birth. I think birth is not to be treated as a disease with hospitals. Hospitals are there, you know, for that. I know there's is controversy there, but I think, you know, babies are fine being born at home, whatever. But in any case, you know, let's take the case of a hospital. You know, the baby's born, then there are other caretakers, you know, that will make sure the baby comes out, you know, where it's supposed to go. And all of this is a process of, you know, there are family members who are attracted to the entity. There is the mother, who can be considered maybe the higher self, if you will, or if you want. There is the staff, the medical staff, or if it's a, you know, home birth, then, you know, there's the family. Then there is I forgot what the name is for the parturition, is it? That helps take care of the baby, you know, and so on. So, and you can even include, you know, their angels, stuff like that. But we're getting into metaphysics, into the analogy. But you see, you know, the process is automatic, but the helpers are there to make sure that everything's fine. You know, they're not making the baby. You know, the baby is the baby, and the violet ray is the violet ray. But, you know, they're there to help in whatever it is, you know, for the process to be, you know, easygoing for the entity. You know, the entity, the confused entity is being born, just like when it dies. You know, I think it's a beautiful analogy now that I think about it. Yeah, because death, life, same thing. So being born, you come out, you're confused, you're angry, you're crying, the whole thing. So, you know, process of the confederation is to help those who are confused. We die, we cry, we're angry, whatever it is, you know, it's the same process, you know. It's like being born in time space. So, oh my god, I can keep talking about this. Half hour already. Let's go into question 2. I don't know if I'm going to get to the other question. Hopefully. All right, now we're going to switch gears into UFOs. This should be quicker, I hope. It's a long question, though, and a long answer, but let's go. Question 2. Don says, thank you. This next question I feel to be a transient type of question. However, it has been asked me by one whom I have communicated with, who has been intensely involved in the UFO portion of the phenomenon. If you deem it too transient or unimportant, we'll skip it. But I have been asked, how is it possible for the craft of, shall we say, the 4 density to get here, in that it seems that as you approach that velocity of light, mass approaches infinity. Whew. Don says, we have talked about the increase of spiritual mass, and it was just a question as to how this transition from very distant planets is made in craft. And my question would be, why craft would be necessary at all? This is not an important question. You see how Don is so careful now to ask transient questions, but Ra will satisfy Don's curiosity. And just to go brief, I think what Don is asking here, you know, if we go back, saying, how is it possible that a craft from 4 density to get here in what is approaching light? This is a paradox that exists, you know, for light travel in physics. Remember, Don, scientist, so he wants to understand, you know, how this happens. There's a couple of hidden things that I'll try to describe, but first let's get into Ra's answer as to how this travel is possible. So Ra says, you have asked several questions. We shall respond in turn. Firstly, we agree that this material is transient, surely. Secondly, those, for the most part, coming from distant points, as you term them, do not need craft as you know them. The query itself requires understanding which you do not possess. We shall attempt to state that what may be stated. Okay, so just to cover again, Don wants to know how can you travel physically approaching light if you approach infinite mass. That would not be possible. So how does this happen? So Ra says yes, it's transient second. Those that come from distant parts, basically they don't need craft as we know them. And the question itself as to how you can achieve instant travel, let's say, requires an understanding which we do not possess, or at least they did not possess. We shall attempt to state what may be stated. So a couple of things here. It's not needed. Craft is not needed, and we'll understand that with this answer. So craft is not needed. And second, the means in which we do this, at least Don didn't possess. I don't know, not that I possess it myself, but I have an idea of who possesses it, or at least a reference. So, but I don't want to claim that, we do. We may not, maybe, a physical impediment in our space-time reality that we can't have it, but I'll try to answer it my way. But first, let's answer it Ross way. Ross says, firstly, there are a few third density entities who have learned how to use craft to travel between star systems, while experiencing the limitations you now understand. However, such entities have learned to use hydrogen in a way different from your understanding now. These entities still take quite long durations of time, as you measure it, to move about. However, these entities are able to use hypothermia to slow the physical and mental complex processes in order to withstand the duration of flight. Those such as are from Sirius are of this type. So, first, there are a few third density entities who have learned how to use their ships to travel between star systems, which we are kind of there. Not really, we're very primitive in space travel, but we're sort of there, we've gotten to the moon, right? At least to the moon. Some people say we haven't, but I'm sorry, I don't know. I wasn't there, okay? It seems possible. It seems possible to go to the moon. It seems possible to go to Mars. In any case, that's not my point, or Ron's point here. It's just that some third density entities, of course, have achieved this in a harmonious way. Not like the way the space race, who gets to the moon first? Like, that's the incentive, really, behind the Soviet Union and the US trying to prove it was a dick-waving war, rather. That's just what it is. Who has the biggest rockets? That's what it was. So yeah. However, such entities have learned to use hydrogen in a way that's different from the way we use it. I don't know what that means. Hydrogen is, I guess, the easiest element, the simplest element in which we can cause some nuclear fusion or fission. I don't know. And that's just energy that can be used, tremendous energy. They might even use the fabric of space as energy. I don't know how that would work. Maybe that's the part where Ron's saying that we don't have that understanding, but in any case, these entities will take pretty much a long time still, because they're not traveling even at the speed of light. So what they do is they go cryogenic, like Han Solo when he was frozen by Darth Vader in episode 5, I think it was, yes. So yeah, we see this in science fiction all the time. They go into, was it Aliens 2, and any I think Star Wars doesn't have it because they have hyperspace. They jump into hyperspace, whatever that is. But anyhow, we're talking about real stuff, or what seems to be real stuff. However, these entities are okay. They use hypothermia, which is that, to slow physical and mental processes. And those from Sirius of this type, we have reference from session 8 I did my homework. Charlie Hickson, remember Charlie Hickson? I think he was talked about again in session 13 or 15, something like that. He was visited, he was taken, for a tour or for a ride, in one of these spacecrafts, and he had the time of his life. So these are from Sirius, these guys who travel from third density to third density. Okay, so that's one way to travel. This is what I would call interstellar travel. Did they say it here? No, they say between star systems, but between star systems, interstellars, in between stars, stellar stars, between. So let's go to the next part where Ra says there are two other types. One is the type which, coming from fourth, fifth, or sixth density in your own galaxy, that would be our own star system, has access to a type of energy system which uses the speed of light as a slingshot, and thus arrives where it wishes without any perceptible time elapse in your view. Let's go to the next one. The other type of experience is that of fourth, fifth, and sixth densities of other galaxies, and some within your own galaxy, which have learned the necessary disciplines of personality to view the universe as one being, and, therefore, are able to proceed from locus to locus by thought alone, materializing the necessary craft, if you will, to enclose the light body of the entity. Okay, so I am a little baffled, not baffled, but thrown off by what would be the other two types, or at least the first of the other two types, which is, of course, using how this works. I'm not sure. This is where I'm thrown off. Using the speed of light as a slingshot and arrive in where it wishes without any perceptible time elapsed. So how does that work? I'm not sure, but they say is from fourth, fifth, and sixth density. When they say galaxy, they don't mean the Milky Way. I think this was corrected by Don, or inquire by Don, rather. So yeah, I mean, they just use it and they travel. This, I'm not sure how it works. They don't talk about a craft here either. So it's access to a type of energy system. There's an energy system that uses the speed of light as a slingshot. And as far as I know, the slingshot effect is the one that is used. I think it is. I may be wrong. But it's like when we want to send something to the sun, say, like a probe to the sun. And we use the moon, then we use Venus for slingshot, because it's gravitational slingshot. So speed of light as slingshot, I'm not sure how that works. So I'm sorry, can't help you there. Maybe some of you know it. Leave it in the comments. But the other type is a little bit more easily to understand, which is the disciplines of the personality. They have developed it so well that they can use thought to travel. Simple as that. The creation is one being. If you have mastered yourself enough, then you can travel for sure. And a lot of yogis and mystic people have achieved this sort of technology, inner technology, to travel. Okay, it's not like you travel with your body. And that's why they say, and at the end, see how they stumble a little bit, into trying to put this into words when they say they are able to proceed from locus to locus, from place to place. It's not physical place per se, but it's locus to locus in the whole creation, materializing by thought alone, materializing the necessary craft, if you will, to enclose the light body of the entity. So it's like they can be present there, materializing a sort of body. Okay, we'll get into that because Don asks a little bit. So Don says, I assume that latter type is the type that we experience with most of our landings from the Orion group. Is this correct? The latter type. The Orion group is mixed between the penultimate and the latter groups. So the Orion group basically uses, see, we talked about the penultimate being the one that uses the slingshot, light as a slingshot. and the other one as materializing by thought alone. So it's not, the Orion group apparently doesn't use physical craft, which is, it puts a lot into question all of these UFO sightings that have been, you know, like, mostly they are from the government, which we've had. I mean, this is, some people may be a little new to conspiracy theories, but even Ross said it. I mean, if you're here in the Law of One, you remember Session 8, that's when they said, like, oh yeah, your government has a lot of those. And this is 1981. They had, I forgot, they gave us a counting about it, like in the hundreds, maybe 1,000, something like that. They even counted them. Not counted, but they just said, Session 8 is so awesome. I feel like revisiting it sometimes. But yeah, so a lot of the sightings might be, you know, the government, mostly the government. Since, you know, other entities first, from 4 density negative, they don't need it. See, unless they're doing it just to instill some fear, which is, you know, it's fine. Orion can do that. So they materialize themselves as crafts, and they provide this sort of experience of fear, which is very common to, it's not super common, but it's possible. It's in the literature of experiences that people have had. I have another theory in terms of this, but I'm not going to get into that because that's just going to derail the whole conversation. So the Orion group is mixed between the penultimate, which is the slingshot effect, and the latter groups, which is thought form. We know that now. Next question that Don has says, why is a vehicle necessary for this transition? When you, as Ra, went to Egypt earlier, you used bell-shaped craft, but you did this by thought. Can you tell me why you use a vehicle rather than just materializing the body? Good question. Ra, why did he do it? The vehicle or craft is that thought form, says Ra, upon which our concentration may function as motivator. We would not choose to use our mind, body, spirit complexes as the focus for such a working. So I forget when they did this, because I think they did materialize themselves later. I think it was their first appearance was as a bell-shaped craft, which I think was the time where the Egyptians and others looked at it and said, or I think it was the time where Atlantis was still running and alive. And yeah, they looked up and they say like, oh yeah, another craft, whatever. So Ra, I guess, didn't need that for that type of working, whatever that was. And they just used the bell-shaped craft, which is funny because every time I hear bell-shape and I think about craft, or at least, you know, UFOs, I think about Die Glocke. Die Glocke is the Nazis' development of UFOs earlier in the 40s, I think. And it was, you know, gravitational or anti-gravity, electrogravitics. And it was a bell-shaped, you know, system that they had. So is Ra Nazi? Oh my god, I can see that in the comments already. You see some silly comments sometimes. Could be, maybe. This whole thing is just Nazi Germany communicating in 1981 through Carla and giving us the ways for spiritual evolution. Oh my god, yeah, we can... I love doing this stuff. I'm sorry. I just love it. So, in any case, yeah, the Ra says that the thought form, you know, that they used was that the key thing here is to know that the concentration, see, when you focus on something, when you're meditating, you can do this. You can focus on something, and Ra has mentioned this, like a shape of something, and that's your focus of concentration. So it seems that, you know, that focus of concentration eventually, you know, for somebody who either, you know, a human who has dedicated its life to meditation and this type of, you know, focusing, or, you know, higher beings, this is the way of creating your own craft to travel, which is concentrating on something, whatever that may be. You know, I'm gonna concentrate on an X-wing or a TIE fighter. I like TIE fighters, pretty cool. That's going to be my way of manifesting, not a bell-shaped. Come on, Maybe they had bell shapes in Venus, but we had TIE fighters here, so let's go TIE fighters. Darth Vader's one. It's pretty cool. Alright, so I don't know if that was a TIE fighter, but what I do know is question 5 from Don saying, thank you. I would like to make a statement. I'm sure I'm somewhat off with this. It's a very difficult question to ask for me because I don't really know what I'm talking about. But it seems to me, and you can tell me where I'm wrong with the statement, that we have 7 bodies, each corresponding to one of the 7 colors of the spectrum. And that energy that creates these 7 bodies is a universal type of energy that streams into our planetary environment and comes in through 7 energy centers that we have called chakras to develop and perfect these bodies. Don continues, and this is, each of these bodies is in somehow related to the mental configuration that we have, and the perfection of each of these bodies and the total in-streaming, you might say, of this energy is a function of this mental configuration. And through this mental configuration, we may block, or to some extent, the in-streamings, I'll reread that again. And through this mental configuration, we may block, to some extent, the in-streamings of energy that create each of these 7 bodies. Could you comment on where I'm wrong and correct me in this that I have stated? Well, I actually need to reread it, so let's reread it together. Not that you didn't read it with me before, right? So, we have 7 bodies, okay? Each corresponding to one of the 7 colors of the spectrum. Fine. Energy, there's an energy. And that energy that creates these 7 bodies is a universal type of energy. So, it's just intelligent energy, basically. That streams into our planetary environment, that's the filtering, cool. And comes in through 7 energy centers that we have called chakras, right? It goes filtered through the planet and it comes out as chakras, that's us. Of course, every one of us is a set of 7 chakras. So each of these bodies is in somehow related to the mental configuration that we have. So these bodies are related to a sort of mental configuration. I wouldn't call it mental configuration. It's more like what we are, our essence of being. And the perfection of each of these bodies and the total in-streaming of this energy is a function of this mental configuration. See, the perfection of these bodies is just allowing the self to be who we are. That's how I would phrase it. And through this mental configuration, or simply who we are, we may block, to some extent, the in-streamings of energy that creates each of the 7 bodies. Right. So, by not allowing ourselves to be, we are blocking, to some extent, what we are. That's simple. So, I hope that makes sense, because it's making sense in my head. Could you comment on this? All right, let's see what Ra said. Okay. Now we go to Ra. Ra says, your statement is substantially correct. To use the term mental configuration is to oversimplify the matters of blockage of in-streaming which occur in your density. Yeah, sort of. The mind complex has a relationship to the spirit and body complexes which is not fixed. Let me reread it again. The mind complex has a relationship to the spirit and body complexes which is not fixed. Correct, yes. Thus, blockages may occur between spirit and mind, or body and mind, upon many different levels. That's right. We reiterate that each energy center has 7 subcolors. Let us say for convenience, oh yes. It's very convenient. Thus, spiritual mental blockages combined with mental bodily blockages may affect each of the energy centers in several differing ways. Thus, you may see the subtle nature of the balancing and evolutionary process. Wow. Okay. So what does the Ra says? How do I make this digestible? There is one energy. We are all this energy, okay? But for the purposes of fun, for the purpose of experience, we are manifesting in different ways. That's why I see you as you are, and we see Ra as they are, and Orion as they are, and so on. Everybody else. The whole creation. Animals, plants, whatever. That is just the filtering of this, and this one energy. There's only one energy. There can be more than one energy. There's just one. Not because I say so, but because rational thinking actually lead us that way. That's why Hinduism got into the philosophy of Advaita, or non-dualism. There's just only one, okay? Or there is no two, actually. Advaita means non-dual, not two. There is not two. There's one, or because one implies two. God's language. So this energy is filter, okay, and then we have the energy centers, which is the essence of what we are. That's basically the way in which Ra explains that each one of us has a specific way of manifesting the self. That is us. The Creator is manifesting in ourselves in a very unique way. Okay. Now we here, and the mental configuration is what Don uses as the essence of who we are and how we perceive ourselves. It's blocking it. You see. So the way Ra is explaining it, saying the mind complex has a relationship to the spirit and the body complexes. The mind complex, I always say that the mind is the center of everything. That's why studying the mind is really what it's going to... I mean, we can study the body, and body being physics, as we know it in science. We can study science, reductionist science, and so on, ad nauseum. And if we don't consider the mind, we're lost. We can study the spirits and all metaphysics and angels and so on, but if we don't take into consideration the mind, you see, this is balancing. The mind is at the center of everything. The mind is actually creating spirit and body. I hope that makes sense. The spirit is not creating the mind. It's the mind creating the spirit, at least in my books. Some other people may say otherwise, and that's fine, I guess, as long as we agree that there's only one mind, there's only one spirit, and the mind is the filtering of both. Period. There's no other way. You cannot perceive spirit without a mind. You cannot perceive a body without mind, and that's just how it is. The mind is the middle. Okay. Or is where everything comes out. So, the mind complex has a relationship to the spirit and body complexes, which is not fixed. Okay? See how Ra also comes out or starts from the starting point is the mind. The mind complex has a relationship to the spirit and body complexes, which is not fixed. That relationship is not fixed. Thus, blockages may occur between or betwixt spirit and mind, or body and mind, upon many different levels. It's funny that I don't mention spirit and body. The mind is always in the center. So there could be, a sort of, what am I? Am I a body? The mind and the body relates to each other, or the mind relates, I'm a spirit. So that those are the blockages that may occur, and then they say, we reiterate that each energy center has 7 subcolors. Now we go really esoteric here. Let us say for convenience, thus spiritual mental blockages combine with mental bodily blockages. Okay, spiritual mental and mental bodily blockages. See, once again, we have the mind always as the mediator, mental. M-E, repeats, may affect each of the energy centers in several different ways. So the energy centers are there, they're doing their thing, but our relationship between mind, body, mind, spirit will affect the brightness of the essence that comes out of these energy centers. That's, to me, what they're saying. Thus, we may see the subtle nature of the balancing and evolutionary process. The balancing and evolutionary process is to allow the self to be. This is the unblocking of our energy centers. Obviously, the lower ones are the most important, because those are the ones that are diluted with a separation of the self, which is the biggest illusion in the universe, that you are separated from everything, that you are a separate being. That's the thing. So, I mean, we can unpack a lot here, and I could just talk, but I don't think there's much practical stuff to take out of this other than saying that the energy centers are obviously, they're there. They're simply there. They have their configuration. They're there to shine, but it is our mental configuration, either with the body or with the spirit, that needs to be balanced and explored for those to allow the energy to flow. Okay, so it's not like you're snuffing out your throat chakra. Oh my God, it's dark in there. I can't see it. The chakra's there. It's in potentiation. It's up to you to activate its energy, to allow the energy. That's why I keep saying recently a lot more. We gotta take a step back from the action, the willingness to act on something, and rather allow. It's hard for our Western mentality, I know, but there's no other way. Acting is just turning the wheel of samsara. All right, last question. I think we got time for this. Don says, I am unsure as to whether this will provide an avenue of questioning or not that will be fruitful. However, I will ask this question since it seemed to me that there is possibly a connection here. On the back of the book Secrets of the Great Pyramid, there are several reproductions of Egyptian drawings or works, some showing birds flying over horizontal entities. Could you tell me what this is and if it has any relationship to Ra? I don't know what that book is. Ra says, these drawings of which you speak are some of many with which distort the teaching of our perception of death as the gateway to further experience. The distortions concern those considerations of specific nature as to processes of the so-called death, mind-body-spirit complex. This may be termed, in your philosophy, the distortion of Gnosticism. That is, the belief that one may achieve knowledge in a proper position by means of carefully perceived and accentuated movements, concepts, and symbols. So, I don't know what the book is. I didn't do my homework there, but what matters is that there is a depiction of something, birds flying horizontally, whatever that means. I'm not sure, but Ra is saying like this is basically a distortion of our teachings of what death means. This may be termed in your philosophy the distortion of Gnosticism. Here, I am inclined to believe, this may be taken as, Gnosticism is wrong. None of the Gnostics' teachings are right. So Jesus was wrong too, because Gnosticism came out of Jesus. But this is a way for me to say, because they're saying, let's read it. The distortion of Gnosticism, okay? The distortion of Gnosticism being that the belief that one may achieve knowledge in a proper position by means, a proper position mean placement of the soul, by means of carefully perceived and accentuated movements, concepts, and symbols. So rituals, basically. And this is why I said at the beginning that I wanted to mention something at this question, and we got here. So this is to believe. I think they say something else. Yeah, there's more to say, but Gnosticism has many things right. But just like remember, Gnosticism came out of the Christianism or Christianity that started forming in the 1st and 2nd century after Jesus, of course. And it was going away from the church, the church as an institution, and this is what created the Catholic Church and so on. Christianity by the books and not by Gnosticism, which is inner knowledge. So a lot of them, I think it was, it was Valentinus, who was in the 1st century or 2nd century actually. He was the most, to me, who has the most knowledge of the teachings of Jesus, at least at that time, and wanted to kind of create a sort of, philosophy of thought rather than a religion, obviously, or something like that. It's a philosophy of thought. But of course, Gnosticism can also be taken just like Buddhism. Buddhism is taken sometimes into religious context, in religious distortions. So, it's humans, man. It's humans who play with the tools. So, all right, Ra says, just to finish up this point and the last part of this video. In fact, says Ra, the process of the physical death is, as we have described before, one in which there is aid available, and the only need at death is the releasing of that entity from its body by those around it and the praising of the process. Releasing that entity from its body by those around it and the praising of the process by those who grieve. By these, I got confused here. I'm thinking while I'm reading. By these means may the mind, body, spirit which has experienced physical death be aided, not by the various perceptions of careful and repeated rituals. Okay, so let's mummify. I'm going to Egypt now. Let's mummify this body so it can go into the eternal grounds, and so on. Or gods. I'm going to use Game of Thrones here. A Song of Ice and Fire. Let's burn Drogo, or the Khal Drogo, or whatever Khal, so they can. His steed may ride him to a star, and whatever becomes a star. All of those rituals, fictional or not, but hey, we do this stuff. There's I think there was a tribe in Papua New Guinea who used to burn their ritual was to burn their deceased, and then they would eat the brain, I think it was, for some reason, don't ask me. And the interesting part here, and I'm sorry that I laugh about this, but I just get a kick out of things. Humans are funny, and the things we do. So by eating their brains, they develop something that's called Kuru disease, which is something like cow disease, which is really what mad cow disease is about. Which, our factory farm, they're so bright that they will feed the entrails and the brains of their own kind, and lo and behold, we have diseased cow, mad cow disease. Anyways, the point is that those rituals that they did, humans, and they developed this disease, and that was by thinking that they could do something with the body so they can elevate, which is really a primitive way of thinking. Now we know that none of this stuff, but that this goes into the same idea of doing rituals and stuff. It's different to sit and pray for the people that have died, and me, I've been able to deal with death recently, the past year actually, with my parents, and you can see how there's a lot of ritualistic stuff going on still in in the families and so on, which is fine. There is a love and intention there, but it's not helping in any way to elevate the person. The ritual itself, I'm not saying the intention, of course, so it's just the intention, how we see what when they say, when the entity from its body by those around it and the praising of the process by those who grieve. Releasing the entity from its body, it's to release from the attraction that we may have, that pull that we have on people, and that's what creates some lingering ghosts sometimes, or the orange ray body, which is just a sort of hallucination that exists. It really is. It's a hallucination. Whereas the ghosts that we call, and we talked about this a couple of sessions ago, that would be the too much pulling of this entity, because you don't let them go. Let them go. And they're saying the praising of the process by those who grieve. Those words right there are crucial for anybody who's dealing with death in the family, which is really when we get attached to them. Detach yourself by praising their process, being grateful that they're going through their process. I do this, still with my parents. I still, and I'll probably do it for the rest of my life. And anybody else that dies, who's really close to me, I'll keep them there and say, I am so happy that you get to enjoy the creation. Because you see, I'm gonna leave this up to here, and then we'll go to conclusions. The creation is not one that loses. The creation is one that evolves. Much like the planet hasn't lost anything, if you think about it. I mean, if anything, it has gained some, mass by the asteroids and meteors and other dusts and the sun's particles that come into the earth and never leave. So you think, anyhow, yeah, don't talk to a scientist. So, but the planet is evolving. It's always there. You know, it's always been here and always will be. Okay, yes, it'll be devoured by the sun and so on. May crash with another planet, whatever. You get the analogy in that sense. I'm talking to myself here. So, you know, the planet's evolving the same way. The universe, the one universe, it's evolving. So when somebody dies, is a transition of the energy that they represent back into time-space. So look at it as time-space being everything that there is, and space-time is only the playground. So we come into the playground through a membrane, which is called a veil. We cannot see anything in time-space, or at least not everything. We can get a glimpse of it sometimes, mystical experiences and so on. But once you die out of here, you get reabsorbed by the membrane, okay? And now you're still the same person or the same entity, but evolved. So everything is evolving, you see, and that is a process. You know, we just have the idea of time. Time is going to get you, man. And once you die, you die. You know, when you're dead, you're dead. It's not like that. It doesn't make sense to be like that. It just doesn't. It doesn't clock in with everything else we know. So, conclusions. We discussed harvest. We talk about death now and travel. I don't really care that much about travel, other than, you know, the idea that we can travel through thoughts, and we actually do it all the time. And we travel through time with thoughts, right? We go to the future all the time. We live in the future. Or we live in the past, depending on what your configuration is, where you are obsessed with your mind. The mind does not exist in the present. Did you know that? The mind does not exist in the present. So whenever you use the mind, you're living in the past or in the future, which is fine. So, okay. So, harvest and death. I think that's a great way to wrap up this first part of session 51. Harvest is a process that is always, and they even mention it here at the end. They say, death is one in which there is aid available. To know this is harvest. Harvest is always, and even when there's no harvest in between incarnations, there is always aid available. That's why you heard the stories of people dying and saying, I saw my near-death experiences and so on. People who die too, or people who are dying and they say, oh, I see them, you know, they're here, so on. What they're seeing is, you know, their guides, their angels, their ancestors, their guardians, you know, whatever they're seeing, you know, it's all that host of entities that are receiving them. So, you know, that's important to keep in mind. And harvest is really just the placing, the natural placing. Just like they said here at the end, you know, there is no ritual that will help you place yourself. So in any case, so say, you know, if somebody died and you don't know if they're going to go to fourth, you can't do anything about it. All you can do is simply release them so they can go through their process. Their violet bubble is already set for harvest. Whether they go into fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it is, or they stay here in third, you have nothing to do with that. There's no rituals that you can do. There's no prayers, nothing. Just release them. That's all you can do. And the person or the entity who is going, that just simply goes, you know, into whatever it is and will have aid. So nothing to worry about. Like Bob Marley would say, you know, nothing to worry, man. No worries, everything's fine. We got to the end of this first part. Second part's going to deal with the bodies, I believe. Quick look. Yes, we're gonna get into the different bodies and some other material on cosmology, death, which is, it's always cool to talk about. We don't have much left, but as you see, we still have more that will probably take me another hour or so. Part 2 will be the next video. I have nothing else to say, but at this point, thank you so much for watching. In the description, you can find, of course, the ways to support me and my work. For now, I'm doing a lot of things in Spanish. I wish I could just do both at the same time, but it takes a lot of time, and I will try to offer this for people here in the English channel as well, talking about other projects that I have, but I'll notify you of that. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being simply this that you are. And I'll see you in session 51, part 2.